don't have the best view. I gotta figure this part out. Okay, I'm gonna play the countdown and then we'll be ready. All right. So I want to take a moment and I want to welcome my guest, Juleigh Mayfield. She is an advocate, an actress, and humanitarian. And she is pretty active on TikTok, has a lot to say, and she is here to share her story. So, Love Over Coffee is a platform and a podcast for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And Julie, welcome. I challenge people to go have a cup of coffee with someone who doesn't look like them, think like them, believe like them, and have lived experiences like them, because I think that's how we learn more about ourselves and obviously how we learn more about others, and especially without judgment. So, um, I always start with the same question. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you've been. Tell us where you're going. And please share with us what makes you feel safe and comfortable, because this is your story.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. You asked me a couple of weeks ago on TikTok in one of my lives if I would participate, and I always take opportunities to do so because I'm a firm believer in, if people don't share their truth and share their stories, perceptions will never change. And as a society, we will stay we're exactly where we are and not go any further.
And we could probably have a 6 hour conversation about where we are and where we're not and where we maybe
and
should
where we'd
be.
like to go and where we're not going. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So my name is Juleigh Mayfield, and it is a pleasure to reach out to all of your viewers as well, and any that are joining on my end as well. Any of my cocktails from TikTok. Hi, my little cocktails. In fact, Tina's having coffee tonight. It's late. I'm having a cocktail.
That's all right. I'm having a frappuccino. This is my Java chip frappuccino with 8 pumps of frap roast. So this is why I'm a night owl, I'm sure.
I mean, that sounds amazing. I say, give me one of those and let's add some rum chata to it. So Juleigh Mayfield, I am an XXY 47 XXY intersex female. I am 48 this year, so I've been around the sun 48 times. We will talk about that and the importance of that number for me a little bit later on. But I am, as you said, an intersex advocate, an actress, a writer, an author, sometimes comedian, kind of a Jackie of all trades, master of none. But I guess where I've been is in this very unique conglomerate of 2 vessels. I've had a very exciting life in the way that I have arrived on this planet.
I was going to say how you came into the world.
How I came into the world, and just have done so many things in the last 48 years. Really, the last 5 years being the catalyst for my advocacy as an intersex advocate, and really coming into my own about who I am. And when we talk about where I am going, I don't know. To be really honest, I have my hands in a lot of cookie jars, but when we really talk about where we're going, I don't know. There are places I could say I would like to be in 5 years or 10 years or 11 years, but truth of the matter is, every day puts us in a position for change, and it can totally be a directive that puts us in a new position or a new frontier, if you're a Star Trek friend, right? But you literally, it would be nice to say I'd like to be here, but I just don't know. And
Well,
and
and often we find ourselves in places where we didn't expect
right,
based on
at
our
all,
experiences. So I
at
feel
all.
like I've already experienced some of that, and I only expect some of that to continue because one thing leads to the next, and then it gets twisted and leads to something else. And so, yeah.
I mean, ideally, it's great to have dreams. Ideally, where would I like to be in the next couple of years? A trophy wife in on a tropical island with a really hot cabana pool boy, and
Do you share? I'm like,
no,
Julie, this sounds wonderful.
I do not share. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I've often
You
said
can you
I
can
don't
come
share my
visit.
toys.
You can come visit, but I will be like, hands off. These are the rules of the land.
I often say I don't share my toys or my boys, but other than that, I'll share just about anything.
I will share my wisdom as to how I got to that point. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
Actually, I am a very sharing individual, and I would share. I wouldn't share my husband,
Right.
but I would make sure that there are plenty of cabana boys.
Okay. Um, so tell us how you came into the world.
So I was born in 1975 in Auburn, Alabama, or in Alabama, a subset. It's kind of funny, right outside of Birmingham in Lee County, Alabama, to educated parents. Both of my parents were professors at a university in Alabama. My mother was the head of a music department there. My dad was an educator, one older brother at the time. And, back in the 70s, they were not doing a lot of prenatal testing. They weren't doing any kind of testing that would show you where your baby was necessarily, what your baby was going to be, how healthy it was going to
Right.
be. None of the things that we do today were they doing in 1975. Certainly not in Alabama.
Right. And some people still didn't want to know. So even when it became available, some people still wanted the surprise of the gender. They didn't want to take
That,
the
and
chance.
a lot of people, even now, jumping all these years forward, they'll offer within the 12th week of utero or gestation, they will
Mm-hmm.
say, we can tell you if your kid is going to be on this kind of spectrum. Would you like to know? And
Right.
some parents will say, no, I don't want to know. It doesn't matter to me. At which point in time, the medical community will still say, oh, well, you may want to know. You may, because people may not want to treat your baby and it may have problems. And it's almost like the medical community has said, you may want to know in the off chance that it's not what you think you're getting, and then we can just help you get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which for many years has been the directive. You're going to
Right.
have a baby on the intersex spectrum. Nobody's going to know what to do with that baby. So why don't you just scrap it and try again later?
So what is that intersex spectrum? What does that
Sure.
continuum look
Because
like?
we really can't talk about where I was coming from and how I came into the world until you kind of know some of the basics of what intersex is. What intersex is intersex, the word intersex is medical terminology that was set up to cover, as an umbrella term, 42 variations of the female X chromosome on a spectrum between XX and XY. So XX is the chromosomal pattern for female,
Mm-hmm.
XY is the chromosomal pattern for male. So in between XX and XY on that bridge is 42 variations of the female X chromosome. Any of those variations are deemed intersex by the medical community.
Mm.
Now, those variations can present in a myriad of different ways. You can have a combination of organs between male and female, i.e., like a female sized heart, male sized lungs. Maybe
And
you
these
were
are
born.
so these are internal. So your organs internally can
So,
be
yes. So basically, intersex, once you're on that spectrum, right? The dome or that umbrella, being on the intersex spectrum, you can have characteristics, sexual characteristics, and non sexual characteristics of males and females. And typically, when you're one of those variations, you don't have enough defining characteristics at
mm,
birth to be one or the other. So you're kind of in between the
right.
sexes, meaning you are intersex. You're in between, you're on that spectrum. And so take XXY. I'm XXY. I have an extra female chromosome, the X chromosome, attached to all of my
Mm,
XY chromosomes. Now, there are people out there that for many years would say, well, you're still a boy. You're a man. You can't change that. You're a man. And you go, well, okay, but I have an extra X chromosome.
right.
So I'm XXY. If the Y chromosome fell off, I'd be female. And if one of the X chromosomes fell off, I'd be male. And I have characteristics of both. And I personally, we didn't know this in 1975, but in my 40s, I found out I had a female sized heart, male sized lungs, a diminished Adam's apple, a partial uterus, an underdeveloped pancreas, one ovary and one testicle, a
Mm,
female cervix, the 3 or 4 centimeters of a female vagina canal inside, but not a vaginal opening on the outside. A really small male penis, which I joke and call a game show buzzer. But I call it that because people see it and they slap at it, and you're like, you're not going to win a cruise in $500. Quit slapping at it, please. Right. And, but people don't understand it. And they're like, well, what is that? Well, that is how I use the
right.
bathroom. It's ambiguous. I have ambiguous genitalia. But then people go, oh, well, that makes sense you're a hermaphrodite. No,
That's what I
that's
was
not
going to
what
say, and that's an
that
old
means.
term because
That
we
well, and
have
that's not even a
right.
hermaphrodism in humans doesn't exist. Right. And even in the intersex community, people will challenge you on that. And you'll say,
Mm,
look, and I had this conversation this week with another intersex creator at Pride. As advocates, we get really upset because the information that's out there, even information that's on the internet, which we know is not always factual, actual information because it's been on there for 80 years, right? Or is from, a textbook pre Christ, right?
mhm,
Hermaphrodism does not happen in human. That would mean that you would have to have a fully operational female reproductive sexual set of organs plus a fully functional male set of reproduction organs fully in your body. That doesn't happen. It happens in animals, but it has never happened in a human. And people will be like, but my best friend has a vagina and a penis. No, your best friend has shades of both
mhm.
sex organs, and that's
Right.
where it falls against the Prater scale in a hospital, but they are not a true hermaphrodism, or they're not a true hermaphrodite.
See,
That,
we had a case
that doesn't
here
happen.
in I'm in Lexington, and
Okay.
so probably in the I would say maybe the 50s or 60s, there was someone born here that everyone called him Sweet Evening Breeze. You can look him up. But he basically, they said, was born with male genitalia on the outside, female on the inside. His mother gave him up, left him at the hospital. Some nurses raised him, and he basically lived his life, I guess, in drag, and used to shop in different places for mainly women's clothes. So we knew him as someone from our town, but I don't think anyone really knew him.
Well, and when you tell that story, He sounds like he absolutely would have been on the intersex spectrum. I
Right.
think where people get a little confused is being intersex does not mean you're into drag. It doesn't mean that you are into dressing in women's clothing. It doesn't mean that you're trans. It means you're intersex. You were
Right.
born intersex. Everything else literally comes down to being an ideology of how that individual feels. But,
Right.
and I'm not saying that you can't be trans or a cross dresser or gay or non binary and not be intersex. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying all of those are identifiers for how somebody feels. There are plenty of people that are intersex that are inherently cisgendered and feel straight and don't want to go anywhere but straightness, right?
Right.
There are, and I'm not trying to mix words. I'm just saying I know people on the intersex spectrum that are inherently straight. They want to get married to what they believe is their
Mhm.
lifestyle. They don't want to even deal with the fact that they have other characteristics of a female or a male. They don't want to deal with. They want to be straight fully. Do you know what I mean? And they don't even
Mhm.
find out that they're
Mhm.
intersex until maybe they try and have children, and there
That's what I
is
was
a
gonna say.
fertility aspect to it, right? Not everybody on the intersex spectrum can have kids. Some can. Not everybody in the straight world can have kids.
Right.
Some can, right? And that doesn't mean you're any less viable. It just means that, and I think where people forget is being intersex, it's not new. It absolutely,
Mm.
everybody that's intersex in our community knows this is not a new thing.
Right.
However, because it's not taught and it's never been taught, because they've always pushed us into the dark even further and said abort them, and nobody's going to want to know what to do with them, and nobody's going to want to help give them
So we
palliative
can't
care,
say,
right? So because that's never been taught, you literally say it now and people go, huh? Like we always joke, it's like taking your etch a sketch, and we've come so far drawing this wonderful picture, and then people get to the point where you say, oh, by the way, they're intersex people, and they shake their whole etch a sketch and part of that picture falls away, and they're like, huh?
so we can't really say that science caught up, because really science has always known that this has existed. We've just pretended it didn't. Or we have assigned a gender at birth.
I think the general public, because of apps like
Mm.
social media and Instagram and TikTok
Mm.
and Facebook and the book face, I think because all of these platforms are available now, you're starting to have intersex individuals come forward and say, I don't fit your mold. I'm intersex and I
Right.
do exist. And that's any marginalized community. They're
Right.
able to come forward and tell their story and share their truth because of platforms like this. And that's, I mean, you can say a lot about the internet and social media, and we all do,
But
but
that's its power.
you also, there is power in visibility.
Right.
And that it is allowing people like myself to come forward and share our stories. And then people go, huh, oh,
Well, it opens up the conversation of, for many of us, we have, like it or not, we have learned this LGBTQIA, people call it the alphabet, we've learned this vocabulary, but we really haven't understood for a long time that gender is in your head, not in your genes. However, genes, I mean Jeans, because we have only seen the male and the female, and we've attached a role to the male and we've attached a role to the female, and we have seen it as binary, but it's not. There is a gender fluidity that we have not been exposed to. Again, back to the conversation of science may have known it existed, and we may have sometimes known an individual where we questioned their gender, or we questioned their interest in the other sex or the same sex, But again, these conversations have not been mainstream. So we have just, again, tried to fit ourselves into, I'm male, so I'm over here. I'm female, I'm over here. If you're not in one of those, what are you?
I think what's inherently interesting too, and I had this conversation this weekend as well. I grew up Christian, uh,
Oh,
and
gosh.
but I grew up with the knowledge of he doesn't make mistakes, and he knows every hair on my head, and I am a byproduct of him. And when I talk and advocate, I am I have empathy in knowing that not everybody believes in religion and God. Okay.
Right.
I've had the opportunity to speak at a church once, and a woman that knew me growing up and knew that I had been in the boy vessel a lot approached me and said, "Well, you're an abomination." And I turned around and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" And she was like, she was kind of flippant. And I said, and I'm prefacing this story not by saying Christians are like this, because there are
Hmm.
some, but there are some that are not like this, right? Everything is a spectrum. I've learned in this life,
It's a spectrum.
everything is a damn spectrum,
That is
like
the truth
everything.
right there.
So I had said to this woman, I said, "Do you believe that God created everything on heaven and earth?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you believe that God doesn't make mistakes?" And she said, "Well, yes, of course." And I said, "Okay."
Then how the hell did I get?
I said, "He has literally created intersex in every breathing species on the planet." And then I went on to say, there's a shark that was just discovered in Taiwan that has XXY chromosomes. Here's a
Well,
kangaroo in Australia with XXY chromosomes. Here's a dog that is a hermaphrodite, but also has the calico cat has XXY chromosomes. There's a bird in Pennsylvania that is literally split down the middle. That's one side's female, one side's male. Here's an intersex lobster. The parrotfish changes its gender in the ocean. Like, I literally gave her a litany of animals,
don't forget about the seahorse.
plants, and animals in the ocean, plants, flowers. I went through the litany with her. And then I said, if that's truly your belief, how blind of you to think he would do it in everything else on this planet and not do it in humans.
Right.
How
Right.
blind of you. And I said, now that you have that information, as you stand here slackjaw in front of me, go home and use the knowledge that God gave you to reflect on the
Right.
conversation we've just had.
Absolutely.
How blind of you to think that he would do it, and you acknowledge it. You acknowledge it. How many people, when that bird in Pennsylvania a couple of summers came out, Facebook was flooded. Everybody I knew was sharing the post about scientists that had found a bird in Pennsylvania that was some kind of hawk that had female and male characteristics. Literally, the scientists said you split it down the middle, you open it up. It literally was a male bird and a female bird with XXY. And everybody was like, "Oh my God, have you seen this? This is amazing." And I'm thinking, y'all are acknowledging it in a bird and thinking it never happens in a human.
Well, and your response to the woman in church can only be responded with a big amen, because I am fascinated by a lot of the, well, two things: serial killers and cults.
That sounds like my dating life,
It's
Tina.
like, yeah, well,
Serial killers and cults.
Julie, we could definitely compare notes, because I've dated a few as well. Um, but you know, seeing the Christianity and how extreme it can be taken to create, again, this binary that some people just cannot fit into. Um, there used to be a meme that would go around every so often: if your religion teaches you to hate, you're in the wrong religion. Um, and yet, it is something that we do quite easily, quite normally, without much question. And I'm like you. If God counted my hairs, and he knew me before I was here. He created me. Then all aspects of that creation exists. And I'm getting ready to take a class. In fact, I'm working on my master's in pastoral studies for Roman Catholics, and I'm getting ready to take creation spiritualities. And this is what we're going to talk about: is I believe creation is taking place every day in new and different ways, and that we have to accept that creation in its entirety without question. Um, but we don't do that. You know, we argue about all the little details. Um,
One of my favorite, and it's so funny because I'm a firm believer in you're put into, we talked about this earlier, you're put into situations that you're meant to be in,
yeah.
whether you know that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently looking on my wall in my bedroom. I'm facing my picture wall, and my name is right there, Jules. And then right next to it is one of my favorite um, quotes from the verses from the Bible. It says, "Before you were born, I set you apart."
Mm,
And I'm lucky in this life that I have gotten to live as challenged as it has been. I am lucky that I have gotten to live such a unique existence
yeah.
in both vessels. And what I mean by that is, you had asked me earlier, kind of, how did I come into this world, right? So I came in the boy vessel. And I say that honestly because even when I talked to my parents about that time, my dad said there were things that were said during your arrival that we didn't put a lot of precedence on because of the way it happened. And new parents in the 70s, you're not really thinking about, he goes, in birth, you're kind of hoping, I hope that they have all their fingers and toes and that they're healthy.
Mm,
And he said the doctor came out and said, well, it's small, but it's got one. So here's a boy. My dad said, I didn't put precedence on that in the moment because
mm-hmm.
you're happy that you have a boy.
Right.
And he
Right.
goes, but as you started to grow, I noticed it wasn't like mine. And I noticed it wasn't like your brother's. And I think you noticed that. But we didn't question it because on the outside, you looked and seemed healthy. And because there wasn't a word in the 70s for autism, because there wasn't a word in the 70s for slow to talk and slow to walk and eye hand coordination and all these other things. Yes, these are everything that I experienced as a child, but there wasn't anything then to quantify what you were
Right.
going through. And so, therefore, there wasn't a way to label it. And then, therefore, you struggle as parents to say, well, there's clearly something going on, but nobody's supporting us in this. So, what do we do? So, you acquiesce as you can as parents. My parents didn't let me slide. I'll tell you that. They were hard on me as educators. They absolutely were hard on me. And years later, my dad was asked in an interview about the challenges I faced growing up, and he told them what I had gone through, and then he told them what they went through as parents. And somebody said, "Gee, I guess you wanted to really kill him." And my dad said, "Oh, I am pretty sure that he wanted to kill us." Like, we all went through the same trials and tribulations and didn't really have answers. So at 17, I was playing football in a private school in Orlando that we had just moved to, and our division changed. Our football division changed. And so everybody on the team had to go get physicals.
Mm,
And so I go to get this physical per the state of Florida for divisional change in the football teams. And the doctor called my parents in and said, he hasn't really gone through puberty. One of his testicles has not dropped. He's got low muscle tone. He's got all of these signs that kind of lead me to think that he may be, he may have something called Klinefelter syndrome. And he goes, I want a test for that. So the doctor does the test. He comes back to my parents and says he has Klinefelter syndrome, which from the 40s up until
Mm-hmm.
about 2018, they called
That's not
XXY
long ago, is it?
Klinefelter syndrome. And part of the part of the archaicness even in our own community is people say, oh, it just happens to boys. You have to be a boy to be XXY, so you're still a boy. Julie, even in this form and vessel, you were a boy, so now you're trans. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. Females can be born XXY. People can be born XXY that have more female characteristics than they do
Right.
male, or all female characteristics. I know men that are intersex that fully present as men inside and outside, and their chromosomal spread is XXX, and they have no Y.
Wow.
So, but then again, in 1994 and 1993, they didn't have that information. They weren't
Right.
researching it here in America. So
Mm-hmm.
they said he has Klinefelter syndrome. And then they told my dad and mom, they were said, the extra X means nothing. It's dormant. It's not going to affect him at all. He has low testosterone. So let's just put him on tons of testosterone that will materialize and balance him out and make him a little more masculine, which is what everybody wants.
Right.
And and
Especially since at that time you were living as male.
right. And
So it's
then,
like,
but I had felt split my whole life, even up through my pre adolescence. I felt split. I felt different. And even as a young male in high school, I felt like I was probably gay because I wasn't interested in women. And, um, and so, um, started working at Disney, started doing all these other things, acting, everything else to kind of take my mind off of this because you would basically just come out and said, you're a freak and you shouldn't be here. Basically. I mean, that's not what he said. I had actually, so they were telling my parents the weight around his midsection is called the Klinefelter belly. Do you know what I heard this week from another intersex creator? They told that intersex creator, their doctor, that they had in a whole different state years later, because this creator is almost 20 years younger than I am. When they found out at adolescence that they were XXY, the doctor said, well, when you have Klinefelters or XXY, your body type, you're either going to be tall and lanky, so you're a Barbie, or you're going to be short and squat like a potato. You're either going to be a Barbie or a potato. And my roommate said, I can't believe that a medical doctor would actually say that to a patient. Your body type is either going to make you a Barbie, you're going to be pretty and statuesque and have female qualities, or you're going to be a potato and look short, squat, and ugly like Shrek. And I thought, that's what's wrong with our medical community. And that's the level in America of
right.
doctors that really kind of understand genetics and chromosomes. So anyway, 17, I find that out. The doctor actually told my parents when I found out he needs to quit playing football because one good sack will kill him because of his muscle tone and bone density. And he shouldn't be alive. And my dad said, well, what do you mean he shouldn't be alive? And he goes, well, if they knew what you were dealing with in 1975, they would have advised and pushed you to abort, and you should have. And my
mom say that.
My mom said we never would have done that. And the doctor responded with, well, it's going to be a crapshoot as to how he turns out in life.
Oh my God.
He probably is not doing well in school. He probably will grow up to be a hardened criminal, which was the same information they're still pushing in some narratives for intersex individuals, which plenty of intersex creators and individuals in life have now shown you that's not accurate information, but you're pushing it to fearmonger parents into getting rid of their intersex child because they don't fit your medical narrative.
But Julie, not many people. Now, I'm going to preface this with, I don't think that many people use the term intersex. And so for me, when I happened across your TikTok, what you were talking about made sense to me at that point. Like it was like, this is a thing. It's been a thing for a while. Nobody wants to talk about this thing. But even the word intersex is not a thing we hear about. So for you to be an advocate for intersex is huge because it's just like I'm still learning the ableist language. You know, well, look here, and you say it without thinking to a blind person. We use all of those that ableist language, but it's the same thing. I mean, your story blows me away,
I mean, it
Julie,
is. I mean,
because
you think about some of the other variations on the spectrum. And look, 42 variations. I understand those variations. A lot of them don't want to be labeled as intersex.
right.
That's not saying you have to label yourself that way. Our push is letting you know that that's how that's how doctors and nurses around the globe label us.
So what's the
So
percentage that
that's
may
the
be?
intersex. So currently, 2% of the world's global population are aware that they are intersex. Now,
How
listen
many
to
are
that
not
again.
aware?
Well, because it happens more often than not. Most people don't find out until they've gone to try and have a baby or through fertility, or they have another crucial, chaotic thing going on in their body that people or doctors can't figure out. And then they test them and say, oh gosh,
Right. Okay.
you have Turner syndrome, ma'am. Or oh gosh, you're XXY. Or oh gosh, you are triple XY. Or oh gosh, you're XXXX. Or oh god, like that's when they find out. So when we say people that are aware, 2% of the world's global. Now, some studies will say 1.7,
Right.
some will say 1.8, some will say that's not enough to make a difference in the world. But 2% of the world's global population is 153.4 million people. Now, is it a small number? Yes. That's the amount that know.
I was going to say, so how many don't know?
Who knows? But going back to that whole, he's created in every other species, don't be so keen
Right.
to not think it happens in humans. Who knows? Right?
Mhm.
Um, the thing is eventually, I hope that it'll get to the point where people say, your story is interesting, but you're human first.
That's exactly. I know for
Well,
me,
Tina, we have the same skin.
right.
I have the same kind of arm you do. We all bleed red, like we all bleed. Like eventually it'll get to the point. And this is where it's funny too, because people ask me about dating a lot, and they'll be like, well, what kind of man would be into you? And I'm like, the same kind of man that's probably into you. You'd be
And the
surprised,
thing is, I
right?
mean,
I'm like, you'd be surprised. And it's like when people go, well, what kind of man would want to date a trans woman? The same kind of man that want to date you, that is open to, and I say in all my dating apps, when I'm looking for dates, I say, I am looking for somebody, a man, but I'm looking for a man that does not listen to society when it comes to the ideology of how he feels about how he wants to love and be loved on this planet.
someone who's open. And the thing is, open not just for intersex or
You
trans or
okay.
LGBTQIA, whatever alphabet, but just open to communication, open in general.
I've said this before on TikTok. Everybody else that knows my cocktails know. I am not drinking this cocktail right now because of the glass it's in.
Right.
I'm drinking it for the cocktail.
Right.
When you buy a bottle of Coke at the grocery store because you're hot on an afternoon and you're driving through the dead summer heat, you're not buying it for the plastic bottle it comes in, you're buying it for the Coke.
That's true. It's like I have to admit, I'm going to Chick
You,
fil A because they got chicken minis, not because of their politics.
people
Although,
love me, and people love you, Tina, and people love their neighbor and their best friend and their mom and their dad for their life spirit, for the spirit on the inside of the vessel. And when
right,
we die, none of this comes with us. None of our human shell comes. Whatever you believe in, I think everybody can agree that none of this goes with us when we die.
right.
Ashes to ashes, dirt to dirt. But you know what ascends? My soul and my life spirit, your soul and your life spirit. That's why people get to know us and want to know us.
That's true.
So the same kind of man that would be in a relationship with you would also be attracted to me if he's attracted to my life spirit. And if he's loving me and honoring me and supporting me, he's not going to care about
Right.
my organs or my hood ornament or if I wear earrings or if I get my nails done. He may have preferences, and she may have preferences to what she likes, and I have preferences, but inherently you want to be near them because of their life spirit.
Well, that's like people who get all hung up on the whole pronoun thing. And it's like, if you present to me today that I should call you he, and tomorrow you present to me that I should call you she, I'm going with whatever it is you tell me you are. Why?
Right.
Why is this such a like? But yesterday you
I
were
honestly feel
right.
like I got into a lot of heat on TikTok when the pronoun trend came out, and everybody would come into your lives and say, "Do you support the pronoun trend?" And I'm like, because you have to be really you have to kind of dissect what you're going to say so people don't hate you, and I thought, I support people that support the pronoun trend. I support people that want to tell me how they identify. Absolutely. I don't need to tell the people in my life that surround me and support me that I'm female.
Right.
Because if they're in my life and they already know me and love me and support me, they're going to know that I'm female.
Right.
And I told somebody even further than that, if I was at the bank right now, if we were all at the bank and I turned around with my deposit slip and was walking out of the bank and stuck it in my purse and somebody opened the door and I'm passing them, what am I going to say to them? I'm probably going to say, "Hi, thank you."
Yeah.
They're not in my life. I would like to assume that they would think, "Oh, she's a pretty female," but I don't know them, so I'm not going to stop and take a moment to be like, "Hi, thank you for holding the door. My pronouns are she, her, they, them." Like,
Right. Julie, I love you already.
and I've said to other people, and I'm like, and that's not to say I don't support the trend.
Right.
It's just
Right.
that I think there are people out there that use that pronoun trend to further listen to what I'm saying. They use the pronoun trend to further harm, hurt, and marginalize the already marginalized community. It's kind of like saying, walking up to a trans woman and saying, "Hi, what are your pronouns? I don't want to be rude. What are your pronouns?" And then the woman turns around and says, "Well, thank you for asking. My pronouns are they, them, and she, her, and my name is Abel." And then I feel like that person that just asked wasn't really caring enough to ask, but they're going to turn around and be like, "I knew it. She's trans. She used to be a man.
Right.
Her pronouns are they, them, Abel, who names their kid Abe." Like, and we don't need more of that in the world. We
Right.
don't need more of that dissension. We don't.
Right.
We don't need more of that. And I figure, look, if you overstep and call, and this is the other part of that pronoun trend, I guarantee you 100%, if you approach somebody, because we've all had it done to us before, and you misgender somebody, if they are misgendered and feel threatened in that moment, they're going to turn around and say, "I'm sorry, that's not what I am, or that's not who I am, or that's not how I identify. Please refer to me as this." I'm more threatened and upset that people feel like they have the right to come up and ask me that.
Yeah, because in a way that
especially if I don't know you, right?
It's-
And if
I'm
I want to
just
identify as a box of
this.
cornflakes, I should be able to. And that's what I'm saying. You can. If somebody came up to me and said, "What are your pronouns?" and I said, uh, Wheaties, I identify as a box of Wheaties,
Do I
then by
know
all means,
you?
I would hope that they'd say, "This is my friend Julie, and she's a champion box of Wheaties. You should get a bowl of her in the morning. She's a powerful bitch." But that's not how I choose to identify.
Right.
And that would be okay if I did.
I'm going to identify as a cup of coffee from this point forward.
There you go, your Java chip, right? But and I'm not making fun of the trend.
No,
Let's
I
be
get
very
it. I get
clear.
it.
I'm just saying, if I worked with Janice in accounting for 12 years and I always respected her as Janice from accounting, and in the back of my head, I knew that she had children and that she also liked jazzercise, I don't necessarily want to get an email now that says, Janice, aka Jazzercise Mom, she, her, they, them, rock star. Like, I already treated you as all of those.
Right.
And I'm going to continue to treat you that
Right.
way.
Again, it comes back to the human aspect. If we could just learn to treat each other as human beings and add the humanitarian aspect to how we interact in the world with our environment as well as with people, it's the whole same conversation when it comes down
Same
to
thing.
when someone says Merry Christmas. You don't have to be a bitch and say, well, I celebrate. It's like, just say
Right.
thank you and go on, or just when they
Right.
say Merry Christmas, say Happy Hanukkah and keep walking.
Happy holidays. Hope you're surrounded by warmth and light and everything that you enjoy about the season. If they turn
Oh
around and
my
say,
goodness.
fuck you, I don't like the season, then be like, well,
Okay, bah
happy
humbug.
holidays. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, it, it's just on some levels bizarre. So going back to the intersex word, yeah, a lot of people don't know the word
Yeah.
intersex.
Yeah.
But if we treated everybody as humans,
We won't. We don't need
we
to.
won't
Really.
need that label. But that label is a part of who we are, right?
Right.
And in the community, for those that want to use that. I'm in a great group on Facebook that I moderate for XXY individuals. And so many of them are like, I don't identify as intersex. Great. Well, I'm not saying you have to. I'm
Right.
saying if you check into the hospital and the doctor puts intersex on your chart, you need to know that that's what he's talking about
Right.
or
Right.
she's talking about. And you need to not get all bent out of shape about it, because we're
Right.
not saying that means to you, the XXY individual, that you have to feel split, that you're part female. That's not what we're saying.
All right.
It is possible within that spectrum to absolutely feel that way and be that way and have mixed organs, but that's not true of everybody because it's a spectrum.
So someone commented over here, and I think they're probably uh, laughing my fat ass off after you talked about identifying as Wheaties, is what I'm thinking. But their name is Cameron, by the way. I don't know if
Hi,
that's
Cameron.
Okay, so you're 17. There's a lot going on, and now we
So
and
they put me
the
on
podcast often sometimes goes over, so don't
That's
be
fine.
alarmed.
So at 17, they put me on a. So first off, my dad was like, "Well, you're missing the mark because he's doing extremely well in school. He's on the dean's list. He's graduating next year, and right." So they say, "Well, we need to masculinize him out, or he's going to have problems long term. So let's put him on a bunch of testosterone. He'll get a shot every 2 weeks. That'll masculinize him out. He'll be good to go." Basically, they were saying the testosterone is the band-aid he needs, and all of your problems are solved.
Huh.
Oh, and don't worry about that extra X. It doesn't mean anything in the long term
Well,
It
I'm
doesn't
going to
mean
tell you right now, as a perimenopause, menopause, postmenopausal, they still don't know a lot about these hormones.
right.
I
So
mean,
I go on all this testosterone. I go off to college, right, to major in theater. I get into college, which was a big deal for my family because I did struggle throughout adolescence, and a lot of us do that are on that spectrum. And so it was a big deal that I gotten into college. There was a lot of pressure for me because I was going off to college feeling gay, lived in a super conservative, somewhat Republican um, Christian home. My older brother was the golden child, superstar, Dean's List,
mm-hmm.
valedictorian, football star, like set to be, I think my older brother could have run for president. And I mean, he was the Alex P. Keaton of our family, and I adore him. But I mean, that was the pressure I was up against. And there were 10 years between me and then my sister was born 10 years later. So it was almost like two separate families. Then my
Right.
little brother was born after that. And I really was right in the middle and the only one that was struggling as much as possible. And so I go off to college and I drop out of college after my sophomore year. I came out to my parents as gay. We struggled. I thought, I'm an actor. I don't need to stay in college. Tom Brokaw didn't go to college. Like, let's do this. And then I moved to New York. And while I was in New York, I had a prostate cancer scare. And I was acting and doing off Broadway and theater and doing my own thing and living my best gay life. And the young doctor I had said, we did a biopsy and it came back benign. And he goes, I don't know anything about being XXY and I don't know anything about really hormones, but I can tell you that excessive amount of testosterone you're on since 17 has probably led to this moment. And if you continue on this path by your 40s, you'll probably have liver cancer and other damage to your body. So he goes, I would get off of it as long as you don't care about having a higher vocal range and maybe being lethargic sometimes. He was like, I would get off of it. And so I went, okay. And I got off of it. And then I didn't have any problems health wise until my 30s. Now, in my 30s, I'd left New York. I was living in LA. I was doing film and television. I was building my resume. And then I lost all my teeth at 35 due to something called tontadorism, which affects intersex individuals. And it ended up me having to have my jaw broken and scraped and all of this extensive work done. And then I got dentures. And to the tune of about $36,000, all of that work being done. And then I got bit by something on my leg and almost lost my right leg. And then I got bit by something else in my left leg and almost lost my foot. And then I was having issues with pneumonia and bronchial issues. And then I was having migraines and all these things were happening. And then in 2015, I went over to Europe for 3 months to audition for Game of Thrones. And while I was in Europe and doing this kind of whirlwind European trip, I got bit on my left foot. On the second toe closest to my big toe, I got bit by something. We're thinking a spider, but you really can't tell after 3 days what has bit you. A month and a half into that trip, after I had auditioned and not gotten to be on Game of Thrones, we were in Paris, and I had been looking for the whole month and a half for something to debride the wound on that toe, and I couldn't find anything. And at the same time, I was in constant contact with my sister's husband here in the States, who was a general practitioner. And I'm showing pictures and I'm like, please don't tell mom and dad. Let's not worry them. What is going on, though? What do I need to do? So I get to Paris. I took conversational French in high school. So I knew enough to go into a chemist in Paris and say, I need hydrogen peroxide. And so they brought out this big, massive bottle. The pharmacist is looking at me, and I'm like, I was really hoping for like the 99 cents kind, I just need a little. But I literally went back to the hotel, poured the bottle over my foot, wrapped my foot, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and that toe was black and spongy.
Mm.
And I knew that it was dead. And so I checked into a hospital in Paris. I went in. The doctor came out and said, "Oh, you're gay. You must have AIDS." And I said, "No, I'm pretty sure that's not the case, but I'm pretty sure the toe is dead." I ended up in the Paris hospital for the weekend. They didn't give me any antibiotics. I went into sepsis. I ended up leaving the hospital, to going back to the train to get back on the train to go back over to England. And customs said, "We can't let you back in. You're sick." And I said, "But my passport and everything is in England." And I said, "Look, we were your allies during the war. I really need an ally now." And so they allowed me to go back into the country. They checked me into a local hospital in Colchester. I was there for 3 more weeks, missed my plane flight home, right? It became a whirlwind. But while I was in the hospital, they removed that toe and had to remove a huge section of my left foot. And when the doctor came in, and all of this will be in my book, and of course I've talked about it before on TikTok, but when the doctor came back in, he said, "You realize that everything that's going on in your body for the last 5 years is a direct result of you being XXY and your body fighting for dominance." And he goes, "When you get home to the United States, you need, for your own good, to eat everything on XXY. Good information, bad information." He said, "They don't have great information in America. They never have. The leading researchers for XXY will be Australia, the UK, and Japan. Read it, eat it, study it, become it, act like it's a course in college." And I attribute that doctor literally
He
for
saved your
saving
life.
my life, because up until that point, all the American doctors had said to my family and me was, "The extra X doesn't mean anything. Take all this testosterone, you'll be fine." And in all actuality, my body was shutting down on itself and fighting with
Right.
itself to keep myself alive. And I was starting to lose the battle. So I
Right.
came back home to rehab with my parents. And while I was rehabbing, I had to apply for disability because I couldn't work anymore. And I was trying to rehab, and it took 8 months for my foot to heal. And then they put me back in a hyperbaric chamber. And while I was in the hyperbaric chamber, I seizured. And that brought up all my seizures. And they were like, "Why is he having seizures?" And then they were like, "Oh, we think he's had seizures his whole life. We need to check on that, because sometimes the hyperbaric chamber brings up other issues you don't have." So all of this is chaotic. And then the NIH, the National Institute of Health, said, "Will you come take part in a study that we're doing on XXY males? We will pay for you to come out here. We're not going to tell you what the study is for, but
Mm.
we're going to put you through a battery of tests. And at the end of the week, we will have the information we need, and you will go home with a blueprint for your health for the rest of your life." And I thought, I'm not married. I don't have kids.
Sign me up.
I absolutely need to do this for the longevity and future of other XXYs. I will do it. I go. And the day I walked in, they were like, "Well, didn't you bring anybody with you?" And I said, "Well, why would I bring a participant? I don't necessarily want other people to know what I'm going through." And they said, "Well, we just found with our other subjects that by midweek, they tend to have a mental breakdown." And I thought, what are you going to be doing to me?
What have I signed up for?
I literally was like, "Is this Stranger Things? Is my name 11 and you're going to have me crush a Coke can with my mind?" And honestly, it was intrusive testing. I had to do 12 hours of audio hearing testing. They put you in a dark room, and for 6 hours straight for 2 days, they said, "Where do you hear the song?" It's a bing, and you would have to lean your head, bong, you would have to lean your head. And they were trying to do things that would see where you'd break. And then you did all the testing, like the ink blots and the literally you felt like you were two again. You were telling them where the square peg would go in the hole. Like
Wow.
they were doing all of that. Then they were doing MRIs with contrast, MRIs without contrast, MRAs with contrast, MRAs without contrast, brain scans, ultrasounds of your whole body, like all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
On Wednesday of that week, middle of the week, they did hormone draws. So we went in at 5:30 in the morning, and for 3 hours straight, every 15 minutes, they did a panel to see where our testosterone was, our free range of testosterone, and where our free range of estrogen was. And my medical team had 8 doctors on it from different departments. And there was one other guy in there because they have 2 subjects per week that would come and do this study. And he left. He did his and he left. While I was getting everything taken off and all the leads taken off and the blood things taken off, my team comes in and says, we need to have a conversation with you. And I thought, okay. I thought, I can't, am I going to the principal's office? Like, what did I do wrong? And they said, well, you know you're XXY and you know you're intersex. And I said, yes. And they said, and you know that you were born with a diminished Adam's apple and that your other testicle never dropped and that you were told you have Klinefelter syndrome. And I said, yes. And they said, well, we'll get to that in a second. They said, we're not actually sure how you walked in for this study on Sunday. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, we're a little baffled because, and these are some of the greatest doctors in the country at the National Institute of Health, right? Military doctors at the top of their game, endocrinologists that are literally the leading endocrinologists in
They
the
set the
country and the
standard.
world, right?
They set the standard for everyone else that maybe doesn't follow it, but that's who they are.
Absolutely. So they said, you're 43 and you're a male. You should have a free range of testosterone that your body actually produces somewhere above 700 milligrams a pull, a draw, right? And then you should have a free range of estrogen that's somewhere above 400. And every human makes estrogen and testosterone. Clearly, men make more testosterone than estrogen. And then clearly, women that aren't intersex would make more estrogen than testosterone. But we all make a balance of it because that's what we need to exist. I said, correct. And they said, great. Your highest draw for the last 3 hours of testosterone was 7. And your highest draw of estrogen was 40.
Wow, Julie.
And you've been having all these problems because your body is shutting down on itself. You also were born with a vaginal canal, but you don't have the vaginal opening. You have a underdeveloped uterus. You have one cracked fallopian tube. You have the lower skeletal system of a female, but the upper skeletal system of a male. You have a female-sized heart, but male-sized lungs, an underdiminished Adam's apple. It just means it doesn't protrude as much as it would in somebody else. And then they said you have a underdeveloped pancreas, but you don't have diabetes. They were like, that's intriguing. But your blood sugars when you're sick hover up in the 6, 7, 800 range. But a lot of intersex people have high blood sugars and they never have the fallout from diabetes. But beware, you're going to go home and doctors are always going to want to put you on diabetic medication because they're going to say you're diabetic, but you're not. And then they were like, and all of this is going on. You also have osteoporosis of the lower back and spine, and you have lupus. And, oh, by the way, you've had night seizures ever since you were in the womb. So what your mother described as you being shaking or muscle spasms or stretching in the womb, you can actually attribute to you were seizuring. You have epilepsy. And they said, there's not a cure for that, for any of those things, but your body responds better to estrogen than it does to testosterone. And so if we have to give you extra hormones, it's going to have to be estrogen. And that's going to slow down the overall progressiveness of your lupus and osteoporosis. And I said, okay. And they said, also, you don't have Klinefelter's syndrome because Klinefelter's is a disease of the testes, meaning you have to have a set of testicles to have Klinefelter's. The reason your other testicle never dropped is because it's an ovary. Only XXY individuals will develop Klinefelter syndrome, but not every XXY individual is going to have testes. Right? And so I said, okay. And they said, you need to go home and have the testicle and ovary removed. You need to have a partial hysterectomy. You also have precancer in your female cervix floor, so you need to have all of that scraped. And here's a doctor in Orlando that's willing to do it. Oh, and by the way, we need to start you on that copious amount of estrogen yesterday. Do you have any questions? And I said, yes. How much estrogen are we talking? And they said, well, a lot. Why do you ask? And I said, I understand that trans individuals are on 4 to 6 to 7 milligrams a week, and they transition within 2 years. So that's why I'm asking, because I'm a gay man. I'm not trans. I'm not sure I want to be female or at the female end of my spectrum. So I want to know how much estrogen you're going to put me on. And he looked at me and he said, 58 to 62 milligrams a week for the rest of your life. And I said, that's going to cause me to transition. And he said, yes, but to the female end of your spectrum that you need to live. And he goes, we honestly believe that if you don't go home and do that, you will be dead by 48. And he said, I understand what we're asking. And I understand mortality is not easy to deal with. And I understand there are people that you feel like you need to call and include in this conversation. So instead of your MRA this afternoon, we're going to send you back to the hotel so you can make those calls. And I had to go back to that hotel and call my mom and dad. And I had to call my siblings, who I had nieces and nephews through that knew me as Uncle Brad. I drank 2 bottles of wine. And then I called everybody, and my siblings were like, we love you. You're our sibling. It's not our journey. And I called my parents, and I said to my dad, I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do? And you know what my dad said? He said, did you ask them how long you get if you do it? And I said, yes, because I knew that would be your first question. And they said, we are not in the business of predictions. But we feel like if you follow our trajectory and our advice, you can get another 17 to 18 years out of this vessel. But medical miracles happen all the time. And my dad said, it's a no-brainer. One of the most educated men in my life one of the strongest faiths in God in my lifetime. Literally, this is the man that when he says, you have a problem, you lay it at God's feet, you pray about it, you walk away, and you accept his answer in time. I mean, this is the man that literally is the strongest, and he was crying, and he said it's a no-brainer. I would rather lose you as my daughter in 17 to 18 years than to lose you as my son in 5. You're going to take the estrogen. And then we are going to support you as a family does. And it's not going to be easy on any of us, but we are going to do what families do. You are going to tell them to give you the estrogen. And I said, are you sure? And he said, you are my kid first and foremost, no matter what. And so I walked in the next day and I looked at the doctor, and the doctor said, before we do all this, I need to make sure that you understand the ramifications of about what's going to happen, and then it's going to happen really fast. But he goes, I need to understand that your mental acuity is where it's supposed to be. He said, do you understand what's about to happen? And I said, basically, you have told me that I am in the worst jalopy vehicle known to man. The bumper's cracked, the interior's peeling, the paint's fading, the windshields are broken, the wipers are bent, the gas is leaking, the oil, and I just described the worst vehicle I could ever imagine that you would find like at a junkyard. And I said, and you're telling me that you're about to give me a BMW S-Class convertible to finish the race. The driver is going to be the absolute same driver that was in the jalopy. You're just giving me a better vehicle to complete the race in. And he said, I've never heard anybody use a car analogy before, but that is perfect. Same driver, same race, just a better vehicle to cross the finish line in. And my birthday is so important this year because on Sunday I turned 48. And I still struggle with lupus. I still struggle with some of the ailments that are indicative of being XXY, but I'm in the best health I've ever been in. And the last 5 years have given me a voice and a platform to now go out and tell the world that we exist and that everybody struggles in life, that everybody, I don't believe anybody in this lifetime, on this planet, on this earth, gets to leave without going through something cataclysmic or chaotic for their own journey. This is mine. And in telling my story, I'm not any better than what anybody else is going through right now in this very moment that's watching this or watching it later. We all struggle. This is my journey. But I tell it so that you'll have a little bit more empathy towards my community. And I tell it so perceptions can change. And I tell it so new doctors will say, I want to champion them and I want to help them find a passage to a better, healthier life. And I want to challenge that, right? And so that's why I tell that story. That's why I tell my story. But it is very emotional for me. And I do wonder on some level, okay, I've made it to 48. Right. Will I make it at 50? Will I make it at 51? Will I make it at 52? Will I make it at 53? I don't know. But 48's emotional for me because 5 years ago, that wasn't on the table.
Right. So, Julie, once you started all of that estrogen, I mean, as you said, the natural transition at the levels much lower take 2 years. What started happening? What, I mean,
6 months. It took 6 months for me to I I mean, I literally came back to Orlando after that week, still went and finished the week. They still gave me a blueprint of everything I needed to do.
mhm,
I came back home and told my doctor, who I adored and who I worked with. And one of the things I champion with anybody that's in any kind of medical situation is make sure you have a doctor that's going to fight for you,
right.
right? If you're walking into a doctor's office and you're saying, this, and this has happened to me, and your doctor's not trying to, your relationship is exactly that with a doctor, just like it
Mhm.
would be with anybody else. And if you can't tell your doctor what you're going through, what you're experiencing, and what's happening with the medication they're giving you, if you can't have an open,
Right.
honest connection with your doctor, that's not the doctor for you.
Yeah, if you're in for 5 minutes and leave with a prescription and no one and you have more questions after you leave than when you went in, nothing got answered. Nothing got taken
And so I'm blessed because all the doctors I've had in my life, now I've worked hard to have the ones that I've had, but all the ones I've had have always gone to bat for me. And I can go in and say, that's not going to work because I already experienced this with that. And I'm not,
right.
and so I came back to Orlando and Dr. Andrew Smith said, okay, well, you need a urologist. Let's get you this one. I was in training with him, and you're going to need an OBGYN. She's the best in Orlando. And literally, had my Orlando team pulled together like that, went on the estrogen, which they started at the NIH, started to have the surgeries and everything done. 6 months in, I'm sitting in Kissimmee doing my makeup one day, and I'm having hot flashes, and it's literally feeling like, I mean, 1 minute you feel like you've been at Disney World for 10 hours and you're doing a wet t-shirt contest,
I
and the
call him
next
my
minute
personal summer.
and the next minute, it feels like you're sitting in front of an igloo and you're freezing and shivering. I mean, all of it, all of it. And people are like, oh, you really transitioned. But you have to remember, my whole life, I've looked female and male. I've had characteristics of both.
Right.
And so, really, the estrogen, even though it was fast, it just kind of intensified some of my already female structures. My
Mm-hmm.
cheekbones became just a little more pronounced, right? Um, One of my favorite people in my life is my personal attorney, and I met her, Dr. Irene Pons. I've done a lot with her already. I met her working at Disney. We met in characters at Disney, and she fights for a lot of the marginalized communities and individuals that she's come across in her life. Herself also being from a marginalized community, um, Puerto Rican descent, a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
She um, was asked once during an interview, how has how has she changed? How is she different? And Irene literally turned around and said, she's not. She's not different. You wanted to be friends with Bradford, and you want to be friends with Julie. And you recognize in knowing Julie that she is exactly the way she was as Bradford. She looks a little different. She's a little she's
Right.
a little prettier, and she has the confidence of a god. And she's like, and maybe that's come from strength and just her having to live this life,
Mm-hmm.
but she's literally the same person. And you meet her and say, I just want to know her. And that really touched me in a way that, because then I was going back to people and I'm like, I'm the same. I'm the
Right.
same. Maybe a little wise, maybe a little more wiser, maybe a little more of a go getter because I'm not intimidated anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've definitely grown a lot in the last 5 years. And I was always powerful in the boy vessel, and always funny in the boy vessel, and always talented in the boy vessel. But this vessel has illuminated and given me so many. I've been able to walk through so many more doors in this vessel.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that she said she's the same,
Right, and
that's
that's
important.
the human level,
That's the human level.
the spirit, the soul.
She's the same. And even when I think about the trans community, and inherently only, okay, so we already talked about the intersex number being 2% of the world's global population. Studies have shown that the trans community is only 2% of the intersex community, meaning intersex people that identify as trans, that's only 2%, right? And when you think about a trans individual, I imagine if you knew them prior to their transition, they are the same.
Right, right, right. Exactly. The core of who you are doesn't change.
That
That's
doesn't
why
change.
that's why I know that having been through what I've been through, narcissistic abuse, the core of the individual that I was with doesn't change. And I'm an educator like your dad. So I'm a 30-year plus teacher. Most personality, most of who you are is formed by the time you're 5.
Yep.
So after that, your lived experiences are either reinforcing that or negating it. And, trauma is
I mean, I
impact.
was a mischievous little shit stirrer before I was 5. So that's the same.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
that
was going to
stays the
say,
same.
TikTok knows you as the same.
Yes. Yes. Right. And
Yes.
so, and I think as humans, we get so wrapped up in our own drama and in our own circles and really everything we're saying, look at Shakespeare, right? Look at his works. I mean, really think about it. A rose by any other name
It's still a
is
rose.
still a rose.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
You can take a mighty oak tree, cut it down, and turn it into a table. It's still a mighty oak tree.
right.
It's
Right.
now in the form or vessel of a table. It's still serving a purpose. It's allowing people to congregate around it and eat on it and get from it, just like it did when it was a tree, because it provided you shade. It
That's one of
provided
my favorite books, The Giving Tree by
a
Shel
giving tree.
Silverstein.
But I
Yeah.
mean, really, if we as a populace would start to attribute humans to those same platforms of the giving tree
Right.
and a rose is still a rose, if we attributed that, how much
I,
further would we go?
oh my gosh, I know we would be um, unstoppable, but so much of what we have learned to do is divide and conquer rather than unite and survive. And it's
Survive and conquer, or fill our own agendic needs, or
yeah,
push because somebody told somebody once that the ultimate gain is power and wealth over everybody else.
yep, manifest destiny. What you have is what I need and what I want, and it gives me power over you. And if you don't get out of the way, I'll just move you out of the way. I'll make laws that make it difficult for you to walk this way. It's amazing to me. Um, well,
And
and I
it's
mean, I know,
ongoing and repetitive. We talk about history not repeating itself, and yet we live every day history repeating itself.
yeah,
You look at something as easy as the Flintstones, which was created in the 40s and 50s by Hanna-Barbera, right? But was placating life in pre-Jurassic times with Fred and Wilma and Betty
mhm,
and Barney. And you can go back and watch those episodes, and literally see your life today. And that's all we do as a populace. That's all we do as people is repeat history.
Well, it's the same thing with education. I've been a teacher, like I said, for over 30 years, and we've been doing education the same way we've done it. We moved from the one schoolhouse idea. All right, I can get that. But we still have this method of I'm going to stand up here and deliver, and you're going to sit and get. And if you don't get it, then I don't really know what to do with you. And
And even in that, we've already learned, and educators will tell you, everybody learns differently, and everybody blossoms differently,
and then
and
the
everybody.
pandemic came, and guess what they found out? The pandemic came, and the haves continued to have, and the have nots continued to have not and have less. And now we are faced with an entire generation of children who did not learn what they could have learned, should have learned, needed to learn. And what do? We don't do anything differently, but still go August to May and pray for the best. And all the research
And
shows
hope that you don't have a school shooter.
right, and all the research shows year-round school has its advantages. Year-round school doesn't mean literally year-round you never stop. It means that you might have 9 weeks on and 3 weeks off. You during those 3 weeks you might do something differently. But I read
And
somewhere
nothing changes. And teachers are
it
still
takes
underpaid and
100 years.
overworked. Yeah.
It takes 100 years to change a norm.
100 years.
And the thing
change
is,
a norm.
if you never, so every year that you don't change a norm, though, is another 100-year cycle. It still won't change. So we haven't really started our 100 years yet because we don't change the norm. we are still, yeah. Julie, we'll have to have you back because
we've gone over by about 17
no,
minutes.
well, and I, I met you on TikTok. I know I already love you. You are an amazing individual with an amazing, phenomenal story. But the key is you're an amazing individual for your story and regardless of your story. And I really, I want to, for those out there who are listening and watching, this podcast and platform, Love Over Coffee, Voices Not Heard, is for us, all of us, to go challenge ourselves, go have a conversation, develop a friendship, do the research. Don't put the burden on the individual who's marginalized. It's called Google, baby. Go find it. And, go have conversations with people who don't look like you, don't think like you, don't live like you, don't believe like you. And, ultimately, you will find and learn things that you don't want to know, didn't know you needed to know, didn't understand, can't believe, whatever it is. But the lived experiences are different for all of us. And as I listen to Julie, I can reflect where I have been wrong. I get to reflect where I've been right, where I've met other individuals that I could have treated better or different or this or that. But at the end of the day, that's what we should do. We should be each other's mirror. Yes, we should look in the mirror and see ourselves, but we should also be each other's mirror. I want Julie to treat me the same way I should treat Julie. Why would I want anything less, different, or more? Why is it so difficult? Why is it so complicated? So I challenge each of you. Truly, I challenge you. Go have a cup of coffee and a conversation with someone who challenges your thinking, because I can guarantee you
Or
that
a
in that
cocktail.
thinking, yes, coffee, water, This drink needs Kahlua. I ain't gonna lie. Um, but I really appreciate it. I honestly do. Like I said, I created this podcast from my own story, and my own manipulation of coffee and reclaiming my love of coffee over coffee by reclaiming myself. And I didn't think I'd be here at 59. I didn't think that my life would be this, perhaps, on this path. Maybe not as figured out as I once thought it was, but figured out in other ways. Um, so I'm gonna give you a moment to get together your last cocktail, and I'm gonna give you a chance to do your final thoughts, and I'm gonna share something. So, love over coffee. Two things out of Love Over Coffee has grown a shameless plug here, Julie. A subscription box series called Love Over Coffee Reclaiming Self. And in it are items, knowledge, activities to self care and self love and to heal trauma. Many of us lead with our trauma. And within that trauma is a personality that has learned to survive. And that personality was formed at 5. And, this next box, which is coming up this week, the May June box. So I'm doing it quarterly. Right now, there's only 20 boxes. I want to grow that number, but I wanted to get the I want to get the logistics down. But within this box for May June is a floral theme that is based on, as much as we look outside of ourselves to see the beauty in the world, which we often still don't see, we also need to look inside ourselves and see the beauty that's within us. And so many of the activities, the knowledge, the items will be reflective of seeing your inner beauty as much as you see your outer beauty. And we all know you cannot pour from a full cup if your own cup is empty. You cannot share yourself with another unless you're pouring from a full cup. Iyanla Van Zant said, "What's inside the cup is yours, and that's your story.
Mhm.
And you only share what overflows, but you'll never overflow until you figure out how to fill your cup." So I hope that this subscription box series continues to grow. The second thing is we now have our first discount code. So I'm coffee obsessed. Everybody knows. There is a website called funnyit.com, and they have a bunch of stickers that are related to a bunch of different things. But some of them are coffee, and some things it's one that comes to mind is what I put in my coffee is confidential, that kind of thing. So just silly. And they have some for pets and some for this and that. Our code is Java Love 23. So if you go to funnyit.com, type in Java Love 23, you'll save 20%. Um, and if you order 100 or more for whatever reason, you'll save 25%. So I just want to put that out there. Shameless plug. I get it. But now we are going to end with your final cocktail thought. So go ahead.
So just thank you for having me, Tina, and thank you for allowing me the platform to share my story on another platform. For anybody that wants to know more about what's going on in my life and be more dialed into my journey, you can check out justjuleigh.com. It is scrolling below. That is my home landing page for everything. So if you're on TikTok and you want to know where you can follow me, it'll have my TikTok. It has everything that I'm kind of dialed into is on that page. You can read my story more in depth. I put a blog out. I also have a podcast called Rosie All Day that's kind of been in hiatus for the last year or so, but is coming back out soon. And I'm currently working on a book and a documentary. Also, a shameless plug. Uh, Focus Feature Films is coming out with a film probably in limited release this summer and probably not in your larger theater houses, but it is on the intersex community.
Oh,
So
wow.
if you have an opportunity to go see that film, check it out. Not knowing what necessarily is in the film, I just know it's probably to date one of the more cohesive, comprehensive projects surrounding our community coming out. So check out the feature focused films when that comes out on Intersex, and then just check out justjuleigh.com so you can stay dialed into everything that I'm doing. Thank you so much, and everybody have a blessed week.
Well, I want to say thank you for watching or listening on TikTok. Please be sure in the future, if you want to go ahead and like the business page, Real Change, REEL Change on Facebook. We also have a YouTube page. Go subscribe. Of course, I'm also on my personal page, Tina M. Durbin. On Instagram, I'm Tina underscore love over coffee 1111, and the same on TikTok. So go find us, go find Julie. And I want to thank you for tuning in. So I'm going to say goodnight on TikTok first, Julie.
All right. Good night, TikTokers, my cocktails.
Okay. And now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say thank you so much for tuning in over here on Facebook and all the right places. So I'm going to end the podcast.